www.thegreatwhitebrotherhood.org.
Atlantis and Lemuria. Atlantis. Atlantis is rather misnamed, because it gives the impression that it was limited to one small island, the provenance of which has been hotly discussed. Now, the main island, that we know as Atlantis, has long since disappeared under the waves, but the problem is, that every time there is an Earth shift, the planet alters in shape somewhat, and land masses rise and fall, causing a total reforming of the planet. So, the original island that was the home base of Atlantis, is now under the sea, the closest land mass existing today, being Portugal, in the Atlantic Ocean. Of course, the shape of the planet was much different before the extinction level event, that provoked the destruction of Atlantis. As we have stated in a previous message, it is difficult to speak just of an island, giving the impression that Atlantis was limited to one small land mass, and thus, ignoring the rest of the world, because, not only were there large land masses, much as they are now, but, at its height, Atlantean civilization, had spread to many of these land masses, and operations of various sorts were carried out on these land masses, closely or distantly connected, to the main island. We have the impression today, that most of what went on, was of a scientific nature. This was not so. Although experiments and projects answering that description were predominant in certain areas, by far, the main activities on a day-to-day basis, were much as are carried out today, providing food, clothing, housing, and the 1,000,001 tasks, that occupy people's minds today. The people resembled humans of today, and lived in houses, huts, and very much the sorts of constructions that exist today. Clothing tended to be robes in warm areas, but in colder climes, people made use of whatever they could manufacture, or scavenge from nature, to protect them from the cold. Building materials tended to be stone on the main island of Atlantis, as the natural trees had long been felled, to make room for buildings, as the island was not very large, and a huge number of people lived there. The technology was, in fact, much like what would be available today on Earth, if the hidden advanced technologies would be released into the public domain. These technologies were spread far and wide over the planet. Of course, there were rural and forest areas, much like there are today, where people lived very simply, but, there were also urban areas, where advanced machinery for heating and lighting was available. There was also extensive use made of flying machines, using anti-gravity techniques. This could be available on Earth today, if these techniques were not reserved, just for secret military use. Religion was not widely followed in the sense that it is today, but, there was respect for the Prime Creator. So, we wish to present a picture of a civilization, that was not very dissimilar to what could be available on Earth today, if it was not for the jealously guarded secrets, by what you refer to as the, industrial/military complex. The main island that you refer to as Atlantis, was very modern, and made use, to a certain degree, of crystals, to produce energy, but nowhere near the degree that modern myths suggest. It was realized by the Atlantean population, that crystals can be rather unpredictable in their effects, their powers rising into the astral and etheric realms, and thus, affecting people, far beyond the hope for power, which was largely just for practical, and communication reasons. The period of time that the Atlantean civilization existed, was for several hundreds of thousands of years, before it was halted in its tracks, by the extinction level event that we mentioned earlier. These extinction level events smite the planet Earth from time to time, and has wiped out advanced civilizations on a regular basis, each time forcing the surviving populations, and the peoples introduced by the directors of life, to reset the clock, and start from virtually cavemen again. Modern people are interested in contact with interdimensional beings, so we will say that, some contact with what you refer to as alien groups did happen, but, as the system of government was much more open and honest, contact with the Greys was kept to a minimum, as opposed to what is happening on Earth today, and the alien visitors were carefully vetted, to discover their true intentions, before being allowed to interact with the Atlantean civilization. For those curious, concerning communication, we will say that, telepathy was widely used, but they did have a language that Sanskrit is now based on. This does not imply that the written language was like written Sanskrit today, nor was the pronunciation like the way that Sanskrit is spoken today. So, we repeat, Atlantis was an island, which gave its name to a civilization that spread over much of the planet Earth, although planet Earth has been greatly altered by the extinction level event that destroyed both Atlantis and virtually all of its population. Thus, it would be pointless in trying to describe the geography of the Atlantean sovereignty, because much of where people lived then is underwater today. Lemuria. The names Atlantis and Lemuria are often linked, as if one was the antithesis of the other. We are presented with an image where only two forces existed, Atlantis and Lemuria. This was not the case at all. The world is huge, as large then, as it is now, so there were many continents, many civilizations, and many groups of people, just as there are today. We are also presented with a picture of two civilizations, vastly superior to us today, with mysterious physics at their command. This picture is largely false. Just as there are, possibly, two major forces in the world today, America and Russia, there are also a number of important countries, China, India, Pakistan, Europe, to name just a few. It was the same then. Although history has retained only the two main ones, Atlantis and Lemuria, there were, nevertheless, a large number of continents, and people that lived outside of the control of these two, that history has recorded. Some of these other people were fairly advanced, and some were fairly primitive, just as they are today. To return to Lemuria. Like most of the Earth's population, the people and the continent of Lemuria was decimated by the same extinction level event that destroyed Atlantis. The original home base was where Java is today, roughly, but has moved, as the planet Earth spun, as a result of the extinction level event. It would be off the shores of Australia today, but is far underwater. The people of Lemuria were of about the same level of advancement as those of Atlantis, and, like the Atlanteans, had spread their interests beyond their shores, and into other countries. But, it would be wrong to suggest that the civilized world was divided just between Atlantis and Lemuria. There were a large number of different civilizations. They spoke a different language to the Atlanteans, a language that does not have a comparison today. They had developed space travel, and, in many ways, we can compare the two civilizations. A parallel today would be to compare America and Russia, which, although vastly different in customs and language, history will be put in the same box, as regards technological development. We must move to the incident that caused the extinction level event, that destroyed much of the planet Earth at that time, and most of its population. It has been suggested that a huge hole was dug in the ground, in an attempt to release heat. This is not true, as the Lemurians would have realized the danger of suddenly releasing pent-up energy, in such an uncontrolled fashion. The truth is, that a satellite from outer space, crashed into the Earth, in the region of mainland Lemuria, and caused a vast volcanic eruption, because Lemuria was built in an area, where there was an underground volcano, much like Yellowstone Park today. The combined result of the impact of the satellite, followed by a huge volcanic eruption, was enough to provoke an extinction-level event. So, all life was eliminated, Atlantis and Lemuria included. In the interests of completing the picture, we must say that the similarities between the underground volcano at Yellowstone Park, and that in Lemuria, are such that we can compare the two. The difference being, that the people of Lemuria exploited the thermals that emitted from deep underground to provide heating and an endless supply of hot water for various uses. So, they did drill into these thermal areas to tap the clean, boiling water below. It may be that remote viewers investigating the demise of Atlantis and Lemuria saw in their mind's eye these drilling constructions, and put two and two together, and presumed that it was that the Lemurians dug too deep, and provoked a catastrophe. This is understandable, but is not the truth. It was a satellite crashing into the underground volcano that provoked the demise of all life at that time.
Thank you for watching this video lesson. Please visit www.thegreatwhitebrotherhood.org for more lessons and free downloadable books.